Dice are rolling, darkness falls. Inside the GM Studios halls. Tabletop games where nightmares creep. In a realm where sanity is lost and weak. Welcome to the abyss where dreams shatter. Inside the GM studio, nothing else matters. Blood and chaos, the dark arts unfold. In the realm of role-playing, where legends are told.
Well, hello there, you sexy listeners. Welcome back to the Inside the GM Studio side question episode of our podcast, where we take a little time out of the week to field some questions from the sewer that is the internet. I am your host, David.
I'm Matt.
And what we're going to do is we're going to roll this die, and hopefully my cat is going to stay put. I get an 8 this week, Matt. Tell me what the internet says when I get an 8.
All right, got it. Let's see. Let's move this over here. All right. This one comes from Teed on RRPG, originally from r/OSR. Okay. With the title, what are your thoughts on campaigns with little to no initial thrust or starting players off with just rumors? First off, the reason I'm not posting this in r/OSR is because I want to hear from players that aren't maybe already interested in OSR games or this style of play. I've been trying to get OSR games off the ground for a while, and I've recently been successful in running an OSC Old School Essentials game like this, but not after several failed attempts. The way I'd like to run these games is by just dropping players into a cool world, giving them rumors, and letting them poke around a bit. But in my experience, most groups weren't a fan. They said that they felt like they had no direction or too much freedom. My thinking was the rumors would give them hooks to look into, and then eventually they'd settle into their plans, schemes, and goals to chase. To me, this feels cool, and if I was a player, I feel like it'd allow me freedom and the ability to inhabit the world rather than just going where the GM tells me, but that's obviously not the case. What are everyone's thoughts on this? Is this still worth chasing as fervently as I want to, or should I hang up the hat and really only enjoy it with groups I know might enjoy it?
Well, firstly, you should always be enjoying something with groups that enjoy it. So that seems like a faulty question, but maybe what he's getting at is how do I make it enjoyable for the players that my current tactics aren't ensnaring into the narrative. So I'm going to choose to hear that way, because otherwise it's just like, yeah, play with people that want to play what you play. That's just easy. So this gets into the heart of the difference between low fantasy and high fantasy, or between high fantasy and low fantasy. Generally speaking, what you're looking to achieve is a narrative that is character driven. But where you're failing is that you're not giving the characters any personal stakes. So some players really like character driven conflict and narrative, right? Like, I can do whatever I want. I choose to pursue this, and I'm going to craft my own. Sorry, my cat just went to jump over the table. She caught my laptop asleep and totally ate shit. Idiot. You okay, buddy? Okay. That's appealing. Most players that I know or have known wouldn't turn their nose up at that. But what you're doing is you're making it too sandboxy without any personal stakes. And typically the way you would ensure that there's some personal stakes is just start with an external conflict. You don't need to give the players the entirety of the quest and whatever, but if they have like a grudge against someone immediately, like the best example is like if you start them off and they're imprisoned in some way, right? Now they have a challenge in front of them. They're imprisoned. They need to escape. Then presumably that will, they're not likely to get out of the prison and go, wow, that was crazy, man. We just got in prison. Probably didn't even deserve it. But like, "Phew, let's go find some adventure," right? They're gonna be like, no, fuck this guy. Why did he imprison me? What is happening? Is there greater corruption at play? I'm gonna get him, right? It's a quest for revenge all of a sudden. So that's a good kind of hook, or failing that, put the PCs in some sort of situation where they're in a dire situation right out of the get. And that might just be dropping them in the middle of like untamed wilderness where they need to survive. They don't have any gear, they don't have any resources, they're far from civilization, they have to fight their way to civilization. Then, then they're in some way starting off with an initial conflict that they can pull at any variety of threads, right? Once they get to an area, they're more likely, if they've survived something and overcome a challenge early that's an external threat, they're more likely to kind of be invested in the area that they're in. And then something like rumors might catch their attention. But you could also try to tie some things like, why are they in the wilderness? Did someone take them out there because they were prisoners? Did someone, uh, was their ship wrecked on some beaches of a jungle? You know, and it's like now maybe they're going to try to find out what happened to the captain or why they got sent on this mission or whatever. There needs to be some seeds of intrigue and some external conflict, because rumors are just a real slow kind of simmer, and they don't really work very well if there's not a bigger narrative on top of it. Um, they pique curiosity, and that's good. But in the absence of a larger narrative, what they don't do is they don't give the players drive and ambition. And if you're going for a more gritty kind of low fantasy or even a heroic fantasy that is more character driven, they need drive. They need something that like spurs them into action. So you need to put them into action instead of telling them that they need to find some action, because they feel rudderless in that case. What are their, try pulling on their backstories. What are their, characters all about? What are their motivations? Are there rivals? Are there mentors? Are there friends? Are there old party members? And if they don't have that, then you're fine to just kind of fill it in a little bit, give them a little that intrigues them, but also drives them. What are the characters after? They after loot? They after revenge? Are they after recovering a lost love? Or these things can all be personal stakes. They're not an overarching narrative, but at least they get the characters invested in the drive of the plot that goes in a more open-ended direction.
I was gonna say that if these rumors are your hooks, if they're not big enough and sharp enough to dig deep into the characters, they're not gonna take. You're not gonna, if they're just simple rumors of, I heard there's a witch out in the swamp, big fucking deal. You need to give it something that grabs hold. So as long as you're, I know every GM wants is the ultimate sandbox, but if your rumors don't have some sort of substance, like David, you were saying, then there's just nothing that really grabs at them that makes them want to go and venture into this, or maybe even asking for more information on it.
Yeah, it's and you latched onto something there, which is like what it means to grab a player is to answer the question, why do I care about this? Why? Why? Because the prospect of danger, adventure, and whatever has to grab a player for some reason, some motive, something that drives them to that adventure. Because otherwise, they don't really know, right? Maybe they're getting into something that is really dangerous, but if nothing that's greater than that danger is driving them to it, it's not a very good value proposition. I could wade into the swamp to investigate that there's a witch there, but she might be incredibly powerful and might kill me. What do I stand to gain? Again, there's no stakes. It's like if the witch in some way was responsible for doing them some harm, or it was responsible for doing the town some harm, or some key NPCs some harm, or if she just had the prospect of like some sort of great artifact that would be a big boon to the players, then now they have a reason, right? And they can weigh whether you have 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 quests that are pretty open-ended because they're tied to rumors. Try to make try to make the payoff for why the characters care about it pretty high for each of them, and then they'll kind of gravitate toward the ones that seem intriguing, because you're failing to understand that intrigue in its own right is not really enough to motivate anyone to do something that is potentially dangerous. We've all felt this way when you watch a goddamn horror movie and there's some noise in the attic and you're like, why are the characters investigating that? It's potentially really dangerous, and they have seemingly nothing to gain other than scratching an itch of curiosity. And yes, curiosity is a strong human motivator, but it does not trump other competing things like a sense of danger. So anytime you're watching a horror movie and a character goes to investigate something and you think they're being an idiot, it's because those two things are out of whack. Like the potential danger, very, very high, and what they stand to gain, like, I wonder what that is. It's like super duper low, right? They need to be matched in some way, right? Like if the danger, like most heroic fantasy deals with this, like some person that you care about is in peril. The princess is kidnapped, and it's like, and the dragon has her, and is like, that's a lot of danger. But presumably the characters give a shit about what happens to the princess because they love her, or because they're trying to curry favor with the king, or whatever. You need to make sure that those stakes are in equal measure to the peril that they're put in. If the peril's not clear and the stakes aren't clear, you're basically asking the player to invent both of them, and their perfectly reasonable response to that is, why am I doing your job? Right? Like, you need to present things. You don't need to hold their hands or have a very well crafted arc that goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, if that's what you're trying to get away from. But expecting players to bring all of the game to the table not only seems lazy, but isn't particularly interesting, because players enter into a game to be challenged with something, not to have their fancies titillated by the possibility of something that they need to craft on their own. So, in the more dire a situation you can put them in to begin with, the more it'll spur them on. I mean, like I said, even if you plop them down in the middle of some hostile wilderness, and the goal is just to survive, to get to civilization, I would posit that even players that aren't initially interested in the whole, like, there's a bunch of rumors flying around, if they've just went through a gauntlet of hostility and now they're in the civilization, whether they explicitly say it or not, they'll be invested in what happens in that civilization, because it is a refuge from the hostile wilderness. So they'll be more primed to kind of go like, okay, let's just see what's going on here. This is safe, but I know how hostile the wilderness is. I've just survived it. Maybe I'm more capable of helping the people here. But you got to give them some breadcrumbs into like why they're invested. Like, even if it's just you come back out of the hostile jungle in the middle of some village, and friendly tavern owner does you a kindness by letting you stay here and be safe and recuperate. And then he says, hey, by the way, I hear this thing is happening out in the wilderness where you were, and it's been kind of fucking up my shipments of wine, and my customers are getting all pissed off. It's like, well, now that guy did you a solid, and he helped you, and now you have some reason to give a shit about his problems. But wandering in, just expecting the characters to be invested in in other NPCs or in conflicts they're not likely to be. And that's not a failing of their imagination. It's just a failing of the structure of what you've laid out.
I think if you want a a drop-in sandbox, there's some things that have to be worked out beforehand. Like the characters need, I'm not even going to say intertwined goals, but they each need their own goals.
Yeah.
Those are something that can be worked towards, and these rumors might be able to spark that goal, that, or at least the drive to find the, or to achieve the goal that they have. Or something in your story or in the setting needs to, bind them in some way. One to rule them all, one to bind them, and all that. The thing that comes to mind is like a Star Wars game. Oh, you're a part of the Rebel Alliance, and the rumors are you hear of a Empire super weapon that's being built off on this planet or something, and that would give them a reason. We're a part of the Rebel Alliance. We should go and check this out. But yeah, it needs to be. You can't just drop them in and give them regular rumors. I think if they have a goal, or at least something about them that would at least bring them together.
Yeah, a shared value is
yeah.
what I would say. So that can often be easily established. I'm not suggesting Matt's tactic is good, but it might require that they do a little bit of character work, and a lot of OSRs are really not so big on like character work. But it could just be as simple as like, why are you an adventurer? This would give you an idea, and press your players a little bit if they're just like saying like, well, gold. And you're just like, okay, but press them a little bit, because that's really generic. It gets stale really quickly, where it's just like, oh, there's gold over here, and there's gold over here, and there's gold over here. And it's like, really, are you going to just keep re-upping on that? That's not likely to be the case. Try to get to something that is a foundational value that doesn't even need to be particularly unique to some backstory. It could just be tied to their class. I'm a fighter, so I, have ties to the Fighters Guild or the Thieves Guild, or, I grew up as a smith, and so I have a drive to create things and build things in the world. Or it could be tied to their race, a heritage of being an elf, or some sort of dark legacy from being a tiefling. I want to prove to the world that I'm not evil like my father was, or whatever. Um, then you have something to latch onto, and you can thread some rumors or things that just touch a nerve. And it really doesn't need to it doesn't need to be super explicit. If it just touches that nerve a little bit with them, and they see an opportunity to pursue a goal, then they're kind of creating their own story in the way that you want, which is to kind of pursue and flesh out. But there needs to be some foundational nugget of a thing that they care about, because otherwise it just seems too rote, and you're totally ignoring the role in role playing, right? Like they have to have some role, and there has to be some motivations for the characters, because things that have the allure of money, they go, okay, well, why are you a football star? It's all in it for the money. It's like, yeah, but why football? You're a great athlete. You could have been a basketball star. Why football over basketball? Why football over boxing? Why, there's lots of ways to get rich. Why did you choose to do this and not be a movie star, right? You could be a movie star. And so you start just getting just below the surface, and you start to arrive at something that matters and motivates them more than, glory and wealth. It's like, okay, even if those were the two pillar things for most adventurers, would probably cite glory and wealth. Just going a layer deeper, well, why do you want to have a lot of gold? Why does having glory matter to you? Those are pretty simple questions that are just right below the surface of a fairly superficial motivation. And once you get at them, then you can just kind of infuse things that are little breadcrumbs to allow those quests, or little seeds, let's say, like present them the seeds of the things that matter to them, and then you can allow the characters to water those seeds and for them to blossom into the plant of an adventure, so to speak. But if you don't give them anything, you just kind of go like, well, you're curious about some stuff. It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure all the people in this village are curious about these rumors, but they're not going to venture out into into the harsh wilderness, into the dark caves, into the forlorn swamp to solve this problem because they have too much at stake. So, what it is that the players stand to gain, why they stand to gain it, needs to outweigh the prospect of that danger. Otherwise, they'll just feel stagnant.
This kind of ties into the one comment that kind of grabbed me off the top from Differently Tiffany that has the flare tag old school dungeon crawler, so she definitely knows what she's talking about. She has to say, the style OP is talking about works better for OSR games. Generally, in OSR games, including OSE, Old School Essentials again, PCs earn XP for gold. For gold. From gold? I'm guessing they meant from gold. So the promise of heaps of gold buried in an underground dungeon nearby is more than enough motivation to team up and get to delving.
Yeah, I had forgotten that. Yeah, in second edition rules and earlier, it was like you get XP for gold, and so, but again, you need to. I would posit that why is gaining levels important to the PCs? Like you seem to be kind of making the assumption that they're kind of self-motivated, that it's just self-evident. Adventurers are supposed to be cut from a different cloth than the rest of the general population, so try to just get at some pillar things that make them different, that would motivate them to a life of danger. And they don't need to be super sophisticated role play, like deep cuts, character backstory stuff. But hopefully they would at least be enough to. I mean, some players just like that kind of like flattened motivation, but heap of gold is like, okay, well, why that heap of gold? Like, why not a heap of gold somewhere else? Because frankly, if they were just concerned with gold in a typically in an OSR environment, the the best path to that with the least resistance is to be like a bandit or a marauder, right? Right? That because it's the danger's very low. You're just like exploiting people that can't defend themselves and taking their money, and there's lots of money to be had. So then why aren't they that way? What things make them different other than just like, well, I'm a heroic character? It's like, but why are you a heroic character
Yeah.
as opposed to a marauding, you kidnapping people and selling them into slavery would be less dangerous to you in this environment and more profitable, most likely, because you would have a certain degree of money and virtually no risk. So try to just get at like why they choose to be adventurers as opposed to anything else that might be profitable. And that's what makes them heroic, because they're distinctly different, and it illustrates that most people in these circumstances would probably choose the path of least resistance, but they're made from something different in their psychology that motivates them in a different way. And so just try to get at that a little bit, and if you just poke at it a little bit, most players are fine to run with it. At least I found.
Let's see, one more comment here. Base Delta Zero says, I have done this before, and I don't think it works as well as a more focused start. All the best campaign starts I've had were ones where the characters were all together and united, dealing with an immediate issue. After the initial starting scenario, the world opens up and they get to explore a variety of different leads. A lot of video games are also structured like this for good reason. Nobody wants to do the you all meet in a tavern scenario once again, after it took about 3 hours for them to finally find a reason to get together and start adventuring.
Yeah, I mean, he's tapped on something that the video games do have it right. Often you kind of are just like, oh shit, I got to deal with this immediate problem, and then once you do, the world opens up a little bit more. That's not railroading; it's just lighting a fire under the character's ass to get invested in the world and what happens, and you can present them all sorts of seeds, and and he touched on what you were saying too, Matt, which is like find something that unites the players. The players are all together and they're already traveling and they have some sort of shared sense of purpose toward a specific end. And what that end is will vary, but the more pronounced it is, the better, right? It's like You don't ever go like unless it's a cozy game or something. You don't um you don't go on quests because you lost your teddy bear, right? Like, or you know, you need an ingredient to bake a pie, right? Like these are for quaint kind of cozy games, but OSRs aren't that. So try to make it as like as dire as possible. They're seeking revenge. They're like they're finding a lost friend. They're toppling some tyrant's grip. They're something that's really potent and almost unavoidable. That's why shipwrecked in a hostile wilderness, imprisoned, are great starting scenarios for an OSR because the players have to contend with them. Or the game just doesn't move forward, right?
Hmm.
They potentially die, or are at the very least just kind of stagnant and imprisoned. But external threats like harsh wilderness, the environment, um, or a tangible threat. You're being chased by a dinosaur or something. Like you have no choice but to kind of contend with that. And then you start at a moment of like high octane, and then once it simmers down a little bit, maybe the characters can sift through their priorities and have a little bit sense of intrigue. But it's also a good way to kind of make sure that the plot has forward momentum because most of these things require a change of venue, right? If you're shipwrecked on a desert island, and you need to figure out how to get off the island, then naturally, once you solve that problem, there'll be a change of location.
Mm.
If you're in the hostile wilderness and you need to find your way to civilization, change of location. If you're being chased by a dinosaur, then at the end of the chase, you're in a different spot. And if you're in prison, then you need to get out of the prison and into a different location. And so this is a real way to make sure that the plot starts off dynamically by shifting gears immediately, even though you ramp up by shifting gears. And so that's a great way to throw the players into the action, and then maybe they can sort out what sort of other motivations they have. But if you can tie one of those, like I said, dire situations to something that would carry over after they've changed locations, like I said, maybe the captain of the ship uh, was a friend of theirs, and they want to know if he survived. So once they explore the island, they find him, or maybe he was derelict in his duties, he was negligent in some way, or maybe there was a rival pirate ship that like uh, shot the ship out of the water, and now you have to find them and get your gold back that they stole from you, or maybe you were imprisoned falsely and now you want to murder the tyrant that put you there, or something, right? It's something that carries over. Those are the best threads for a start of an OSR.
Um, Actually, I got a question for you. So, out of those scenarios that you listed off, which one would you say is your favorite? If you were going to use it for an OSR game.
It would probably depend on whether, like, I'm a bigger fan of the sword and sorcery genre,
Mhm.
um, and so I'm a pretty big fan of the imprisoned trope,
Yes,
especially,
that's mine.
especially, especially if you're imprisoned and you're like thrown into some sort of coliseum where right out of the gate you're made to fight for your life.
Uh huh.
It's like not only are you imprisoned, but now there's like a threat, like an actual
Hmm.
threat, and you start off with a fight and a sense of purpose. Survive and get the fuck out of here. And then usually, if you're imprisoned and put, it's one thing to be imprisoned, that sucks, right? But if you're being used as some sort of fodder, I don't know how your characters could reasonably come out of that scenario with anything other than a burning rage for vengeance. And revenge is a great plot thread and a great trope in pretty much all sword and sorcery things because it's the most personal of stakes, right? And uh, it doesn't require much to develop in the plot because
Hmm.
you start with like this drive that lights a fire under the character, and now you're just putting obstacles in their way to getting what it is that they want,
Yeah.
and that's simple enough.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the imprisoned one as well, but I'm more of a fan of Prison Break afterwards.
Oh yeah.
Especially if like all their gear's taken and they got to first acquire that to get the fuck out,
Hmm.
and then that gives another reason later. Now they're wanted
Yeah.
for escaping prison. Now they got to find a way to get out of the country or the kingdom wherever they are.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a good drive for of course, the adventure now going forward.
Yeah, because they're in constant danger, right? Like they
Hmm.
need to they need to abscond, and then maybe that whole adventure is just about them getting to safety, right? To getting away from the purview of whoever imprisoned them and the spies and the assassins that are after them, and they have a goal in mind. Like once you get on this ship in this harbor, it sails off to another area and you'll be safe. Then it sets the seeds up well for the subsequent adventure where it's like, now let's go back and try to figure out a way to get that guy. Right? Like, so now you have like two adventures. So yeah, I'm with it. Sometimes the Prison Break, though, if you don't have particularly innovative characters, because the key to a good Prison Break is to try to make it difficult and make it all on the characters to solve their own particular problems. And that can be overwhelming for some players that aren't used to a high level of autonomy. But if you're playing in an OSR, then this goes back to my original point. If players don't like that particular element, where a lot of the responsibility on their own survival and success falls to them, an OSR probably just isn't for you, because that's
Yeah.
part and parcel for what you're getting. So
I want to leave here the last comment that the original poster put, and kind of a dickheaded thing to say in my mind. They say, "You're welcome to how you want to play, but it's less guess what the GM has planned and more play to see what happens. When I'm running a game like this, I don't have anything planned. I've read all the material I think might happen to prepare. This is weird, but it's very much in the vein of I am just an arbiter dispensing how the world would likely react to your actions."
right, I get that. I think he means I've read all the relevant information that might happen to prepare. Period. Like, punctuation is key, people.
Yeah.
I can hear you reading stuff sometimes, and I'm like, this guy doesn't know how to use periods or commas or
Yeah.
capitalization or anything. It's like just one stream of consciousness. Yeah, he's basically just saying, yeah, that's just the way it is. Like, and they need to get with it or get out. And it's like, okay, it's definitely a very old school game master kind of mentality. But maybe I'm getting soft in my old age. Like, if your players aren't enjoying it, then that you can't just blame them. Like, that's just what this is. There are tactics to keep the spirit of the OSR and what it is that you think it's tapping into. There's not just one way to do that, right? And and I think that GMs that believe that they're doing it the right way, capital R or capital W, then if you don't get it, then it's like, well, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, dude. You know, you can achieve the things that you want, which it sounds like what he wants is for his players to pursue their own quests, and to explore and discover things. And I would imagine any player that's going to sit down on an OSR is probably in for that. But how you get there and how you propose to them the things that they could potentially do, because the world is not totally open, right? It can't be, right? Because there's only certain amount of things that interest any given character. And then you select them for the things that are in their environment that interest them. And then it narrows down even further. So you just need to do a better job at presenting what those things are that would interest the character, that they could latch onto, like you said, hook them,
Yeah.
grab onto them. And so don't think about it like it's got to be all on them, because it does. The environment in some way is controlled by the GM, and it's not that maybe those things aren't there, but expecting them to be able to, yeah, kind of read your mind and understand what is what without enough detail is not really fair, right? Like, if you miscommunicate it in some way, then of course they'll misunderstand. That's just the way it goes.
Oh man, I just found out there is a subreddit called OSR Circle Jerk.
Nice.
Man, this is going to be a good time later going through that. Oh no, the first thing I see on it, Number 3, time limits. Gary Gygax famously said that you cannot have a meaningful campaign if strict time records are not kept. In page 37 of the original Dungeon Master's Guide. Fuck off, dude. I hated that. I don't know if you've ever read the blurb in the Dungeon Master's Guide about time records kept. About keeping strict time records. It's dumb. I don't like it. Maybe that's something we'll talk about on another episode.
There's
But I think this episode is done.
Yeah.
For all you OSR players out there, chill out. Chill out. Don't. What do the kids say? Don't at us, bro. We're not against you. We're with you. We're trying to help you, but freestyle sandbox adventures or campaigns they're really tough. You can't expect everybody to be ready to just dive into a sandbox.
Yeah.
You got anything else to add on the end here, David?
No, I think it's about it.
All right, I'm with it. We'll just leave this with a good night.
And good luck.